April spending time with her family is our first point. This time period in April's life was before all of her views of white and Aboriginal cultures were her solid opinions. This was a time of innocence where she experienced the joys of a regular childhood, a point in her life where she had fit parents and siblings that she could spend time with happily instead of watching their backs and worrying every second.
Our second point is a hardship. It is when April was taken away from her parents. Earlier in her life, April was separated from her parents at a young age. Being taken away from your parents and not knowing where you're going and why you're going can leave a serious scar in your memories. This is clearly a hardship for April because she never was really prepared to leave her parents.
During April's experience with the foster care, she lived with a family known as the Dions. The Dions were a very Catholic family. They were a family of 5, the 2 parents and 3 children. The Dions were very kind to April and they taught her more about the white culture. They would bring her to church and they would really care for her. This experience inspired April to have a greater appreciation of the white culture than she already had. Even with this being a highlight, life must go on. Unfortunately for April, Miss Dion got sick and couldn't take care of April, which forced her to give April back to the orphanage where she was transferred to a new family.
So the fourth point and second hardship of April is being with the De Rosiers. From transitioning to the De Rosiers from the Dions, she had the mindset of how it would be just another family like the Dions, caring, friendly, but no. The De Rosiers were the opposite. They forced child labor upon her, said racist remarks to her, and made her life miserable. April began to think the things they said were true about her, and they would bully her even more. Her years with the De Rosiers made her feel that Métis people were treated like this everywhere, and this made her have negative views on her own culture. She wasn't respected at all with this family.
Fifth point, third highlight. This event in April's life was one of her greatest moments. Abandoning the need of supervision, abandoning her hardships in the past, and becoming independent allowed her to pursue her goals of assimilating into white society. Being able to leave her past and moving made her able to create her own image as a strong, independent Aboriginal that strays from all of the negative stereotypes of Aboriginal culture.
Our sixth point and third hardship is going to be when April was looking for her parents. During April's adulthood, her search for her absent parents aided her perspective of erasing her culture from her life. She goes through many poor homes and families until she stops searching for her parents because she has lost hope for finding them. After going through those houses, she realizes how poor her culture can be. This was a hardship for her.
Mary and Bob was most likely during the happiest point of her life. This was her acceptance into the white society. She had everything most people want in life, like money, a mansion, and people looked up to them. Back to her acceptance into the white society, this meant a lot to her. Ever since she was a kid, she's dreamt of this, and now her dream was becoming a reality.
The eighth point and fourth hardship of April is her getting sexually assaulted. This event was one that changed her life mentally and physically forever. During it, she felt vulnerable and destroyed. After the incident, she was troubled and weak. Her mental state was at her worst at these times. Anything that reminded her of it made images in her mind of those evil men who caused all this pain to April. She was never the same. Even in a relationship, she still wasn't comfortable for the longest of time. Those men destroyed whatever was left of April and took her spirit away from her. With trying to let go, she always had this memory in the back of her head forever.
The last major hardship April experienced during her life in this book was Cheryl's death.
At the climax of this book, April finds out Cheryl killed herself. This was a combined result of her guilt towards April's rape, meeting her father, and the experience of being an alcoholic and prostitute.
Although Cheryl's death was tragic, this experience caused April to accept her identity and become a prouder Aboriginal, using Cheryl's memory as motivation to become a better person.
The experience of Cheryl's death and finding Henry Lee made April be committed to taking care of Henry Lee to guide him through life and not go down the path as his mother, teaching him to be resilient even through the toughest of times.
This experience in April's life is the most significant to the change in view of her identity and sets her on a new path.
The first highlight is when Cheryl was with her family. When Cheryl was with her family, she felt loved. April and her parents would take care of her. This was the earliest highlight for Cheryl.
The second point and first hardship of Cheryl is her being with the DeRosiers. At first, she thought it would be a good idea to finally be with her sister under the same foster family. All it did was it caused the same pain to Cheryl like it did to April. She was ashamed of how proud of an Indian she was at school and at home. They caused so much misery to her just like April. Especially the DeRosier kids who tried to kill her, which made her even more sorrowful on top of her misery. Cheryl came into the DeRosiers' house as a cheerful little girl, but in the end, she left with misery.
Third point, second highlight. Being with the Steindals was one of the highlights of Cheryl's life. This point in Cheryl's life was a point where she could further build her point of view on Aboriginal culture. This was a time when she could study and take action about her interest in the Aboriginal community and the safe and happy environment the Steindals provided. This was a highlight because this was an innocent time where she wasn't harmed before she experienced all the hardships of being an Aboriginal in modern day society.
The fourth point and second hardship for Cheryl is when she was in an argument with her teacher. When Cheryl was in elementary school, the teacher told a biased story about the Aboriginals and the whites. Cheryl was offended and stated her opinion and how it was biased. The teacher did not handle the situation well and told Cheryl she was wrong because it was written in history. This was an early hardship for Cheryl.
The fifth point and third highlight of Cheryl is her working at the Friendship Center. Volunteering here is what she wanted, to help out other Indian kids who are orphans like Cheryl was, giving back to her culture and trying to change how Indians are looked upon. Cheryl dreamt that this day would come, and she gave her efforts to her cause. Her commitment kept her happy, and it made her inspired to learn more about her culture's past and present. Cheryl was determined to help her culture before her death. This was her life goal.
Sixth point, third hardship. Meeting her dad was really underwhelming. When Cheryl found that lady who said her father was alive, her hopes were raised. Envisioning the image of her father from the past, she imagined a strong, proud, handsome Aboriginal, only having her expectations destroyed when finally meeting him and seeing how low he has gone. Having high expectations of her father, only to have them completely shattered, makes the impact even more painful, even reducing her point on Aboriginal people.
The seventh point and fourth hardship of Cheryl is her alcoholism. This was the turning point of her life from good to bad, the path she never wanted to go down. Cheryl forced this upon her, finding her father as an alcoholic, an Indian who she saw like the ones on Main Street, a gutter creature. The guilt came up on her that she found out her parents were one of them. It made her view on Indians change. Cheryl thought her work was all for nothing, that Indians are supposed to be like this, that nothing can help them. She was devastated and turned to alcohol as an escape. With also feeling guilty for April's rape, she had nowhere to go and she couldn't think straight. Stuck in a hole of grief, her dreams of changing her culture all destroyed by alcohol. She couldn't even stand being Indian, not wanting to be related to them. This path she went down was something she never dreamt of happening to her.
Eighth point, fifth hardship, is going to be April's rape. After April was raped, Cheryl blamed herself. She thinks that if she didn't tell April to get her stuff, April wouldn't have been sexually assaulted. She also feels as if she wasn't involved in all the drama and prostitution, April could have avoided being raped. This was a major hardship for Cheryl.
Since Cheryl was a kid, she's always believed that her parents were very sick, and that's the reason she was put into foster care. She believed this up until she finally met with her biological father after many years. She realized that her parents weren't sick, but instead they were alcoholics. Cheryl later found out that April knew about this the whole time. She felt betrayed and angry. While Cheryl was thinking about committing suicide, she had all these thoughts going through her head about her father, mother, the alcohol, and the guilt of April's rape. She couldn't handle all these emotions and thought suicide was her only way out of everything. She wanted to go out like her mother, and so she did. She jumped off a bridge and died. She left behind everything she worked for, April, and most importantly, her son Henry.